I don't think that President Trump would have won a second term without Charlie Kirk, given the significant swing among not just young men, but even young women towards the right. Ahead of the 2024 presidential election, there was a gender polarization gap prophesized by everyone from Newsweek to the New York Times that said there was going to be, 58-point separation between men and women aged 18 to 30 between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And that gap mercifully didn't materialize because they underestimated, in part, the role that Charlie Kirk played in persuading, through polite and compassionate conversations, default libs on college campuses to come over to President Trump's side. And he was by far the most viewed TikTok creator on the right, especially among that age demographic in the lead up to the election. He continued to tour college campuses and have conversations with people with whom he fundamentally disagreed. He allowed them to jump to the front of the line like Ben Shapiro used to do when he did his college campus tours too. That's where he took his inspiration. And he had very compassionate conversations with women who had had abortions or were suffering from some form of sexual or gender confusion thanks to trans ideology. And for this reason, he was killed. He was one of the most moderate, one of the most honorable, one of the most moral people in this space. As far as I know, everyone who worked with him, had the privilege of meeting him, me included, has nothing but good things to say about Kirk. He didn't have a concealed private life where he had a drug habit or an extramarital affair, unlike plenty of people that I'm sure you and I have both met in politics. Ralph, meeting Charlie Kirk did not leave you feeling soured or despondent about the future. If anything, as I said to him, you felt like you were sitting across from a future American president. And the fact that America has been robbed of a good man, a future president, the fact that his wife has been robbed of her husband, the fact that his children, who mercifully I hope were too young to remember seeing it, but were robbed of their father in front of them, is a grievous loss to his friends, his family, his country, and the broader right-wing movement. Now, as far as Gen Z goes, I mean, they do need leadership figures. I don't see anyone on the horizon as an obvious replacement to Kirk, given how multifaceted he was. He ran the largest single successful youth organization movement in America. He founded it at 18. He ran it for over a decade, and he built it up to be an election-winning engine. He also did a 3-hour radio show every day. He flew around the country with unquenchable energy to engage in these conversations. And I don't know anyone who currently exists that can do all of those things at once. There are great political polemicists like Michael Knowles and Ben Shapiro and even John Doyle, who are all ready to fill the shoes in terms of doing political organizing or doing a radio show, but who all don't quite fit the bill like Kirk did. Kirk was the avatar of like our guy, self-made, Christian conservative, young, energetic, and highly capable. And I hope that other people will be encouraged to come out of the woodwork seeing Charlie's death. I also fear that lots of people are going to be deterred, because the media response to Charlie's death is one of the most repugnant, morally inexcusable acts I have lived through. So, as we know, for the last 10 years, American Democrats, the broader left, the Antifa terror cells in all of our respective countries, especially in Germany, Sweden, and the UK, have been encouraging violence against their political opponents. They've been doxing us, they have been smearing us, labeling us as fascists, racists, and Nazis, and given those are the nadir of the post-war moral order, that justifies violence against you. If you truly believe that someone else is the second coming of Adolf Hitler, then aren't you a hero for taking them out? That is the mentality. And so by smearing the likes of Donald Trump and Charlie Kirk and all of their supporters as fascists and Nazis, you are encouraging violence against them, especially among the most deluded of your listeners, the most febrile and mentally deranged people that tune in and are hypnotized by the propaganda about an imminent trans genocide and systemic racism they hear on cable news and from the communist streamers on Twitch. And so I fear now that in the vacuum of Kirk's leadership, in this space where we all feel we have a bounty on our heads, that people are going to be quieter. I would encourage that they're not. I would encourage they continue to take the risks, but I understand why people won't. And I think a lot of people woke up the day after Charlie Kirk's death to see the celebration on social media among doctors, teachers, members of the military, to see the New York Times use Charlie Kirk's obituary to accuse him of racism, sexism, and spreading misinformation, to see Slate, to see The Nation, to see Pink News, all dancing on his grave, writing things like, well, evil people had kids too, we shouldn't feel bad about it, comparing him to Joseph Goebbels. I think people realized, oh God, the most violent possible act could befall me, and they will not only justify it, they will call for its repetition. And so these people, by making excuses for Kirk's murder, want to see it happen to me too. And this is not just a minority of people. It is a minority of the population on the whole, but it is still thousands, possibly even millions of people in the US and the UK and the Anglosphere in Europe. And so a lot of people are now realizing we have to snip the purse strings of this leftist terror network. We have to deprive the Radio Rwanda of the Democrat Party in the US and our respective media apparatus in the UK, who have also celebrated Charlie Kirk's death, of a platform. We have to make sure that people celebrating his death and encouraging violence are not in positions of influence over children, over the elderly, over the defense of our country. And we have to figure out whether or not we can live alongside in the same country with people who want to wish us dead because we have conversations. I'll finish by saying this. There are three groups of people. There are the likes of Charlie Kirk, who believe in what he stood for and had conversations like he did. There were the people that went to the front of the line during his debates, who don't believe a single thing he said, but believe that discourse is the way that we can resolve our disputes. And that's still, I hope, a majority of people. But as J.D. Vance pointed out in his closing speech when he hosted Charlie Kirk's show in his honor, there is a third group of people. There's a group of people who equate speech with violence and respond to violence in kind. And if we just relegate our response to those people to more speech, like Charlie did, we will end up like Charlie. That is not encouraging street violence. Far from it. I don't want to see another Charlie Kirk as long as I live. I fear, however, that there will be more people who suffer the fate of Charlie Kirk if the likes of the Trump administration do not use their lawful monopoly on force to crack down on these leftist terror networks, to prevent people from slandering their political opponents as fascists, Nazis, and racists, doxing people, putting a target on their back, and funding terror networks like Antifa and BLM. If they do not deprive this network of room to maneuver and funds, then we will get more people, more of our friends, more of us, killed in front of our families live on television. And we shouldn't have that happen.
I mean, maybe we can dive into this a little bit more, because I think you laid out the events quite nicely and its consequences. But if you also look at three other elements, so one thing that you had this Discord channel. So the current investigation where it stands is that at least potentially more people knew about the plans of the assassin. Again, speculation here, but there seems to be some evidence at least that it is possible. So you have these, as you said, like these networks, these decentralized networks that take place on these internet platforms. Secondly, however, I would also add to this, you had the New York Times that then gives Hassan Piker the space to write an op-ed, somebody who has, and by the way, this is all out in the open. This is not Connor and myself making something up. Like everybody who, you just have to go on YouTube and look it up, who has been speaking about, I think, drenching the streets in the blood of the capitalists and things to a similar effect. And they get space in what was once called, kind of the respectable public space like the New York Times. And then you have a third element, which I would also be interested to hear speak to. Do you think that one part of the reaction is because the left has been seeing that they're losing ground? And as you so eloquently described Charlie Kirk's work, is that this was not just some YouTuber or some podcaster who was assassinated. This was, as you said, somebody who was absolutely central to Donald Trump winning the election in 2024, somebody who at some point would have run the Republican National Convention, or maybe, he was only 31 years old, maybe at some point would have run for the office of president himself. So that the kind of relief you can sense, or the justification on the left, is also because they say, okay, this was a person that could have been a political heavyweight, and it was taken out. So you have like the unofficial networks, the official networks, and then almost the after the fact justification for having taken out a future major political figure.
So as far as these decentralized networks operate, some operate out in the open, as we can see on Blue Sky. They're openly calling for killing J.K. Rowling and Ben Shapiro next. But the reason they've all retreated to Blue Sky is because they proactively want to be in echo chambers. I mean, the problem with Twitter is that it was an echo chamber because it banned all the right-wingers before. As soon as the right-wingers were let back on the platform and were allowed to post in community notes correcting leftist lies, were allowed to be in the mentions of leftists, even when they could turn off their comments, they were still getting ratioed in the quote tweets. Because they couldn't stand up to scrutiny, they retreated to an ever-radicalizing rampart that is Blue Sky. And on Blue Sky, you have gotten leftists who have said that Tyler Robinson, the alleged killer of Charlie Kirk, was a right-wing groyper. Now, first of all, the Groypers themselves, I mean, Nick Fuentes called to vote for Kamala Harris last cycle around. He was busy promoting Gavin Newsom for a short while to make Vance feel the heat over Israel. Nick is not in the MAGA coalition necessarily. And this is not even to start a flame war with the Groypers, because I'm not interested in that right now. Like, we need to unify against our common enemy that is currently killing our guys. We can resolve our differences about foreign and domestic policy and which candidate should be president or the like later, okay? But they were busy in their echo chamber deluding one another on Reddit, on Blue Sky, on Discord, that they had no culpability for this, while also celebrating it as a win. So you cannot deal with these people's cognitive dissonance. And we covered before, Ralph, in the immediate aftermath of the election, how Kamala Harris's campaign had weaponized Reddit, breaking its laws, and then rerouted Reddit threads into Discord channels, and then spewed it out onto X when they were still there to create false community notes and mass flagging campaigns to create the impression that Kamala Harris had momentum. And this was just a few deranged activists that lives permanently online, likely Twitch moderators, often Reddit moderators, running Discord servers, and weaponizing, like social media bot campaigns, swarming tactics to shame conservatives, to demotivate them, and to derank their presence on social media. What we actually found out after the election is that X, it turns out, is pretty broadly representative of what the majority think, because Trump won the popular vote. We were worrying, is X itself an echo chamber? No, it turns out that most people are sensible. Most people don't want gay race communism. They don't want to see their political opponents assassinated. However, in these festering corners on Reddit, on Blue Sky, and on Discord, that is very much the case. And Discord themselves are dishonest actors, because after Dylan Butler committed a school shooting in Iowa and killed a 6th grader and the principal before killing himself, he sent to a Discord chat word that he was arming up in the bathroom and preparing to commit the shooting. And Discord had flagged the chat to the FBI at one point, but hadn't passed along his username specifically, and was acting very coy when I believe it was NBC were investigating it at the time. Discord then, in this shooting, had said Tyler Robinson did not use Discord to organize the shooting. That is either dishonest or very slippery language, because he certainly used Discord to inform a chat full of up to 20 people that he was the culprit. We don't know who those 20 people are, but we have seen multiple pseudo-anonymous trans activist Twitter accounts gloating before Charlie Kirk was shot that they knew something was coming at UVU. Those people are being investigated, and I wouldn't be surprised if we found out there were co-conspirators at least cheering this on, or helping with the rifle drop, or helping plan the vantage point, or something. There was also his roommate, boyfriend,
and that, just real quick, just as a quick, and that makes it a terror cell, right? I mean, you can no longer say, oh, well, this was just a deranged individual who woke up one morning. It's that if you communicate with people, if you share plans, and I think also there has been, maybe you can talk to this just a little bit. There is now a debate about the last messages between him and his, what you were just starting to talk about, and his live-in partner, roommate, whatever you want to call it. And so there are two suspicions. One suspicion is that this was fabricated by the FBI. The other suspicion, which is something that Matt Walsh has been writing, which I think is more plausible, that this is an attempt to protect the live-in roommate from being an actual co-conspirator. So what's your take on this broader issue?
Yeah, whether that stilted conversation was authentic or a fabrication, I don't think it matters, because the roommate was informed the day before that Tyler turned himself in that he had committed the shooting. So even in this exchange, which may be fabricated, the roommate is still implicated for not doing his duty for reporting his boyfriend to the police. And it has been confirmed by the family members, multiple family members and friends now, that this is his trans-identifying boyfriend who was on hormone replacement therapy, who was posting anti-Trump stuff on Reddit, who seems to have been in a weird furry role play with the shooter, hence the furry memes written on the side of the bullet casings. And this is the most disgusting part, by the way. All those people on Blue Sky gaslighting people, saying on Twitter and Reddit that this was a right-wing Groyper. Groypers do not accuse Charlie Kirk of being a fascist. The Groyper War was launched against Charlie because he was seen as insufficiently right-wing. He was inviting, I think his name was Rob Smith, a black conservative, conservative gay guy, on stage, and saying that he had no problem with legal migration, just illegal. So they were pressuring him to be more right-wing, especially on things like Israel. It wasn't that they were accusing him of being a fascist. So Tyler, the alleged shooter, seems to be a deranged trans activist with a transgender boyfriend, and may have alerted other co-conspirators to the shooting ahead of time, and at least told his boyfriend he was guilty of the shooting before he handed himself in, when he was planning to commit suicide, according to his own father. So these people are all implicated. Other people that should be implicated, as J.D. Vance and Stephen Miller have suggested on maybe RICO charges, are the broader left-wing terrorist network and the people that operate to permit maneuvering room for violent. Mainstream publications endorse their political radicals, who themselves weaponize terminally online freaks with little to lose because they have often sterilized themselves into being inspired to commit violence because they think they're on the brink of a transgenocide. There's direct connective tissue between the leftist establishment and their radical foot soldiers who now have shot Charlie Kirk. The third point about this, as you said, the reason Charlie Kirk was targeted was actually because he wasn't that much of a radical, because he was polite, because he seemed to have been third or fourth in line to the Trump throne. And everyone knew it, including J.D. Vance, who owes a large part of his senatorial and therefore vice presidential career to Charlie Kirk. To all the people in the administration who Charlie Kirk forwarded their CVs to President Trump and Susie Wiles when they were appointing members. People knew Charlie, they respected him, they liked him, and he would absolutely have made an excellent politician, if not president, one day. And the reason they shot Charlie is actually because he was effective. And the reason that they have chosen the wrong target and provoked the worst possible bear in the likes of Stephen Miller, who is grieving but is not letting sadness overtake him, is letting righteous anger overtake him. The reason they chose the wrong target here is if they had targeted, and I say God forbid here because nobody should know what Charlie Kirk, but if they had targeted Candace Owens or Nick Fuentes or Tucker Carlson, the right would not be so unified in denouncing it. There would have been people going, well, are we surprised that crazy people took a shot at them for what they said about Israel, for example? Now, I would have condemned that too. Absolutely. But the reason Charlie Kirk is such a unifying figure is because he was beloved, he was respected, and he had broad appeal because rather than just talk about politics or his particular hobby horses, he went and appealed to people on a personal level and made more lasting converts. When he spoke to young people on the college campuses, he was saying, there is clearly something wrong with your life in that you are miserable, you are mutilating yourself, you are not in a relationship, you are far from God and tradition, and I wish nothing but the best for you. I will pray for you. When he went on that odious show, the Whatever podcast, where usually rhetorical pugilists just go on to insult OnlyFans girls, and OnlyFans girls goes on to flog their wares. Charlie Kirk went on there and described how much worth it was to his wife, who was a former beauty queen, who he just, talked into marrying him. Smooth as butter, the man was. He's described just how wonderful it was to come back home to his wife and his daughter, and eventually his 1-year-old son at the end of the day. And all those girls were just transfixed. They went from being primed to be hostile to him as a judgmental Christian conservative to dreaming basically one day that they could have the same thing. And Charlie actually wanted the same thing for them, despite their unhealthy lifestyles and the perpetuation of an industry that has ruined the lives of many young men. Charlie was a great unifier, and they killed him for that because he was far too effective.
Isn't that the thing, right? Exactly what you just described, that in a sense, if we put this in broader perspective of the left strategy, it is the normalization of the radical and the supposed radicalization of the normal. Because exactly what you just said, if you look at the videos, if you look at the things that Charlie Kirk did, this man was not a radical. I mean, these are, most of his positions are 80-20 positions. Also, when they say, he was a religious radical, but he himself said, even though he himself is a practicing Christian, he always wants to make sure that his arguments are also based on reason, so that they can win an argument without reference to God, despite him himself having a significant chunk of his work dedicated to God's work. And we live in this absurd world now, and you experience this yourself, is where you say things that pretty much every middle of the road individual would see as completely normal. Again, the things that Charlie Kirk said. They are being described as, abnormal, as radical, as fascist, neo-Nazi, well, all the terms we hear. Whereas some guy who thinks he's a humanized or anthropomorphized cat and is into taking hormone blockers, everything, that is the new normal. And you know what I'm saying is this idea that something that is completely normal is supposedly, according to the left-wing media and the New York Times and others, that's the radical position. Whereas radical, and I would have to say, in some areas like what you just described about the live-in boyfriend or whatever it then was of the shooter, I mean, somewhat perverted, if you will, in the very meaning of the word. Lifestyle choices are seen as normal. So do you think that's a broader attempt by the left, and we talked about this many times also in private, as an attack on, let's say, the pillars of our civilization, to denormalize the things that were for such a long time perceived as normal and were the basis, of course, of the societies and civilizations that we live in?
So people think that the terms left and right are antiquated and they don't apply anymore because they originated in the French Revolution when the House was divided between those who sat on the right and stood for Christianity and monarchy, so therefore faith and hierarchy, and those on the left who went for egalitarian revolution. And I think that perfectly sums up the modern left-right dichotomy. It's not, as it was in the Cold War, a dispute between marginal tax rate cuts and capitalism versus funding public services through socialism, with a little bit of genocide apologia for the USSR thrown in, of course. No, this time is it about exclusivity, hierarchy, and order versus chaos, the pipe dream of an egalitarian utopia based on John Lennon's Imagine, and affirmation of immoral, vicious deeds to quiet the ailing consciences of those who commit and perpetrate them. And so Charlie Kirk represented exclusivity. Yes. He represented hierarchy. Yes. You need those things in order to properly order your life towards the good. Utterly unalloyed freedom without judgment from those who love you is a purely destructive thing. The people that have affirmed Kirk's killer and his boyfriend and their network of suspected trans activists have enabled these people to become self-destructive and therefore outwardly destructive. No, it isn't good to be a furry. No, it isn't good to be a transsexual. No, it isn't good to wish violence from the dark corners of the internet as a shut-in against your political opponents and never interact with them and treat them as fellow human beings engaged in the same prospect of trying to solve problems about your civilization. None of these things are healthy. None of these things are good, but they are being encouraged by one side. They are being discouraged by the other. They're being discouraged by Charlie Kirk, even in polite conversations with his political adversaries who saw him as less than human when they stepped up to the microphone and walked away wondering what was wrong with them. And so this is the great thing that people are confronting now with these three categories. We can live with category 2. Charlie Kirks can live alongside good faith liberals who are committed to solving their problems through discussion. But they cannot live alongside demented leftists, race communists, people who treat criminals as victims, and the people that condemn criminality as the perpetrators. The reason I mention that, the Ukrainian refugee, Iriana, who was stabbed to death by DeCarlos Brown Jr., a 15-time repeat offender with schizophrenia who was let out because of the permissive criminal policies in American cities like North Carolina, often funded by George Soros-backed district attorneys. When he stabbed her to death, when the CCTV footage was released of this innocent woman being stabbed in the neck and bled out while her fellow passengers watched and filmed it, her murderer said, "I got that white girl." Twice. And Charlie Kirk said this is a racially aggravated attack, which has been encouraged by the anti-white racism, preached by the Democrat Party during the BLM riots of George Floyd in 2020, that has been encouraged by Black Lives Matter, who, the day before Charlie Kirk's murder, put on Instagram, "Black people have a right to violence." And when he said this, Van Jones went on television and said, Charlie Kirk is spreading racial resentment and he is the true danger to the United States. You cannot live in a country with people who will make excuses for murder, whether it's Charlie Kirk's, whether it's Rihanna's, because when it's yours, they will also make excuses for it. And so the reason that this is happening is because the left have bought into this idea of egalitarian human nature, of the blank slate. And it's taken on an especial power after the atrocities of the Holocaust and the Second World War, because as someone we both admire, Yoram Hazony, has pointed out, that the lesson of Auschwitz was not that peoples should have states to defend them from an imperialist power that invades them. Instead, it was, well, Hitler believed in Germany, therefore anyone who believes in their country, their heritage, their identity, and their history, anyone who expresses a preference exclusively for something, is indistinguishable from Adolf Hitler, and so we must be open societies, which is where George Soros' foundation got its name from Karl Popper's The Open Society, and its enemies. And so the worst thing you can be is a racist, a fascist, a Nazi, and those terms have been inflated beyond all proportion. And they've been applied to the likes of Charlie Kirk. And all that means now is not believing in the blank slate, not believing that literally every single human being is indistinguishable from each other. And the only reason inequality exists, the only reason cultural differences exist, the only reason education outcomes are different, the only reason that we don't have as much money as one another is the hidden hand of oppression somewhere. And that hidden hand is, of course, white, straight, and male. That hidden hand is Christian. That hidden hand was Charlie Kirk's, and that's why he was shot through the throat. We have to abandon this delusion of the blank slate before more people get killed.